the stiff truth.
Oh, hi. Look at this guy, huh?
Hold on, I'm not. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I love the role reversal. And the funny thing is I have my 40, but I had to set it on a coaster. I'm not an animal.
Oh my fucking God, dude. Be a man. Let's go. You know, ruin the tabletop. Well, actually, that's the executive desk. So good call on that.
Well,
actually.
and I already have a couple of circles here for my shot glass sitting down. I'm gonna have to start putting shot glass on the coaster. Because
shot glass on the coaster.
Well, because the alcohol really like tears into like the lack of finish.
Yeah. Oh Jesus! I just hit my mic.
You need to calm the fuck down.
Oh, there we go. There it is. It's open.
And on that note, welcome to the Stiff Truth. I am Bob West. I am here with Scott Casanova. We are here to tantalize the senses this morning and please the ears and the eyes.
Bam! That was good. That was good. I'm fired up now. And I'm also just very fired up. As you can see here, look, I can't even hide my beverage today for the show because this, my friend, is a glorious 40 ounces of Bud fucking Light. Now, not my number one choice, but probably my number 2 or 3. You know what? It's really kicking in this nostalgia. Oh, that's real good, Bob.
How's that working for you?
You know, there's nothing like rinsing out the taste of toothpaste with a nice light beer and lots of it. The 40 ounce is interesting to me. I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier this week. I don't think I've had a 40 ounce beer since I was probably, which is ironic, since before I was 21 years old. I don't think so. The last time I think I had one was probably 20, maybe 19. I can't really remember. It's a little bit foggy, but I will tell you back in the day, and we're talking mid to late 90s here, it was an automatic thing every day after high school for a while. Geez, I want to say a good solid year. Every single day was a Miller High Life, which is interesting because show everybody what you got today. Come on, let us see it. There we go. The champagne of motherfucking beers itself.
And it's true. It says it right there. The champagne of beers.
No false advertising.
That's it.
Yeah, get in there, Bob.
It's been a long time since I've had one. Sorry, I'm actually just looking for a sign. I'm gonna go with pizza. I don't even know. I don't even know.
Bring it back, old school, baby. You know what I mean? Nothing wrong with that.
There's a reason for that, but I as well. I can't recall the last time I had a 40. Had to have been in my early 20s.
That makes sense.
A little after high school, but they do hold the near and dear place to my heart. So I played a lot of football, and this is really what I blame the migraines on. But I've always gotten migraines since about my junior year in high school. Probably head injuries, all that stuff. But
yeah, there it is. Sorry.
Sometimes in high school, I'd get a migraine, and I just have to. I wouldn't be able to see, and I have to have someone drive me home, and it was insane, right? So, I would pick up a couple of 40s on the way home, and just go pound them and take a nap. And if I did that, I might make it back to football practice.
I love what you did there. 40s as a therapeutic, right? Medicinally, very nice job. That's a good way to maintain. And
a couple of ibuprofen and 2 40s and you're good.
Yeah, that's probably not bad for your liver at all either. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's no negative long-term effects from that.
How could there be?
Well, first of all, how could there be? You were a teenager, right? There are no negative long-term effects when you're a teenager. You can eat and drink whatever, and you can't even tell. There's like no consequences when it comes to that when you're young.
And it was like $4. I could take my lunch money and pick up a couple of 40s on the way home. So a lot of people are listening, especially younger people, probably asking,
what is a 40 ounce?
Did he just say he went and picked up 40s on his way home from high school?
How does that work? It does not compute.
Let me unfold this a little bit. Let me unpack that statement.
Please.
So The 90s were different, kids. First off, let's start there. I also lived in a little town in high school, sort of little, like 10,000 people. And, everybody knew everybody pretty much. And there was this little bar on the state highway where my house was, right? And it was about, I don't know, quarter mile, half a mile away from my house. And back then, it was a drive-through.
Oh, God bless. God bless. I used to go to a drive-through cigarette shop in Moriarty. But anyways, please continue, please.
So yeah, to have someone just drive through or whatever, or I'd be driving myself if I caught my migraine early enough, and I'd go home to the drive-through and I'd just like 240s and hand them the cash. No fucking questions asked.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a tall guy in a truck. He's probably old enough. There was no actually checking of IDs that went on in the 90s.
No. God bless.
So that's ended up how, I mean, there was always that, or if it was a Friday night, there was always the hey bro, which we talked about. Do you want to explain the hey bro, Scott?
Yeah, it's definitely something that you do in your youth, obviously. And it essentially is when you and the buddies, right? You and the homies back in the day want to get your drink on, but have that barrier to entry, being underage or what have you. You got to stand in the parking lot at a kind of a shady, maybe grocery store, maybe a Walgreens, right? Maybe a really seedy liquor store. And you got to find that guy that kind of looks like a dirtbag, but seems like he was like kind of cool too back in the day. And you have to, hey, bro, and you have to say, hey, bro, I need you to pull out for me. Can you do that? And, it's a trial and error. You do get shot down. It's kind of like a sales job, a little bit there. You got to have a little bit of balls in the first place. They go up because the rejection can be, quite a deterrent for a lot of people. Right. And then, maybe getting in trouble, who knows, maybe you're asking an off-duty cop or something like that. But usually you can spot the guys that are going to be okay. They're a little smelly. They're a little dirty.
So in my hey bro experience, would you agree with this? Your chances exponentially grow up if you find yourself a cowboy in a pickup truck.
Typically, yes, 100%. Especially where we grew up, being that it was. Where were you at? You were in Los Angeles, Belen?
I was in Belen, south of Albuquerque. Yeah, near east of Albuquerque.
Yeah, I was in Moriarty. Definitely, those are going to be kind of the first things that you look for. Is a shitty old truck with glass packs, maybe even. That's not a necessity, but definitely a plus in our area of our youth for sure.
Old 4x4 and cowboy boots, and now you've just doubled your chances.
And it's always good to sweeten up the deal too with an incentive for the man, because he could get in trouble. It's like, hey, dude, if you can get me a 30-pack of Stones, right, of Keystone or Keystone Light or something like that, I'll give you a few beers. All right, you know what I mean? Or you give him the change or something like that if you have a $20 bill or whatever it is. There's got to be some kind of incentive, some skin in the game, because they could get in a little bit of trouble even back in the day. You know what I mean? It was a little bit dicey.
Yeah, and it's funny because looking back, it's just like, oh, look, here's this tweaker looking dude. I'm gonna handle it. And then it's like, hey, I need a 30-pack and a bottle of cheap booze or whatever. And why don't you go ahead and get yourself something nice too? like $40, right? They come out with snake eyes and like a bottle of Yukon for them.
Well, and if you think about the 90s too, especially if you're partying with some chicks or what have you, the list that you would get would always be very interesting. You're all like, yeah, dude, can I get like a 30-pack and a bottle of apple puckers and something else like that? You're like
it's all obvious you're partying with chicks, right?
With underage chicks. Exactly. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, it's interesting too, because God, man, I would not, thinking about it right now too. And maybe it's the times. The 90s was definitely a long time ago. If you think about it, Bob, 1990 was 31 years ago. It's pretty fucking crazy. But would you ever even considering pulling out for an underage kid right now?
No.
Yeah, I would love that. The quick response, because seriously, I don't know if it's a different time or maybe now we're just have our big boy shoes on. But at the same time, if some kid came up to me, hey, bro, like probably even before he finished the sentence, I'd be like, nah, get the fuck out of here, dude. I ain't got time for that shit. I'm not going to jail for you, buddy. I don't even know you. Get the fuck out of here, kid.
Well, I try not to commit felonies.
So, are you saying that the saviors of our youth, to a certain extent, were bad people? I'm not even going to buy
I'm just going to say that they weren't great people.
Well, but at the time though, we're like, this guy looks cool, man. You know what I mean? And then when he does pull out and doesn't rip you off, you're all, that guy was super cool. God bless that guy.
These three teenage boys over here with those two teenage girls are asking for a bottle of whiskey and a 30-pack. That seems reasonable. You could go wrong. I'll go ahead and get it for them. You kids have fun.
Yeah, I remember when I was
someplace unsupervised. Bye now.
Yeah, pile into that motor vehicle and take off. Okay. Oh boy,
go
kids
someplace.
Today.
What are you guys doing? Partying? Yeah, where you heading? Someplace where they can't hear the screams. Good for you. Good for you.
Oh my goodness, times were different, my friend. But you know what? That got me thinking here. Not too long ago. And I was really thinking. I was like, look, we've been around now for a handful of decades. Here we are, right? I mean, we're just trucking right along here with this thing called age. But I was thinking, we were talking too. I was like, man, you know, as we were alive, the 80s was super cool, but we couldn't really experience as like what max 10, 8-year-old kids like you and I were by the end of them. You know what I mean? It's just not really that cool. And then we think about the previous couple decades. I don't know. There's a certain element of becoming an old bastard and saying, oh, those goddamn crazy kids and all that shit. I really think that the 1990s was like the pinnacle of very cool shit, especially in our lifetime, Bob. And you seem to agree right out of the gate. There was like almost no hesitation.
Yeah. So the first time you brought this topic up, and he's like, "Hey, let's talk about which decade is the best during our lifetime," and I was like, "And we should talk about why it's the '90s." Like,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, 100% with the '80s. The '80s seems like a really fantastic decade. For me, the takeaway from the '80s that I remember is, you know, the music, the cars, and the cinema, right? So the lasting artistic impressions really from the '80s is really what I take away from it more. I wasn't there to quite understand the Iran-Contra escapade or the political climate of the '80s or really what's happening, you know.
Nor could we appreciate like the pure cocaine of the time either. You know what I mean? We're little kids. It was just, it wasn't, we weren't quite there yet is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So there's that.
When I think about the '80s, like as far as like news goes, I think about like the Challenger exploding, right? So the big reason for that, for those that may not know, in the late '80s, there was a NASA rocket that went up and blew up on national television. Right, just ripped to shreds. And the thing about that was so impressionable is all of us were watching on TV at school when that happened. Right, everyone in the fucking country was watching this Challenger rocket just explode and everybody die. And instantly, like the teachers all turn it off. Well, let's move on.
Well, let's go back. Let's turn on channel 1 real quick.
Yeah. So from the '80s, I mean, there's lingering and I know because of research and growing up and having an older sister, like the scene and the climate that was going on back in the day, and the merging of technology with you know, social aspects of fashion and trends and everything was really interesting. That's when first people started wearing headphones everywhere. I mean, it was a really liberating thing in the '80s.
I will say this too, and this is kind of right along what you're saying. Everything that we love about the '90s was kind of fine-tuned or fully blossomed in the '90s, but planted and rooted in the '80s, right? You had compact discs, personal computers. They were all a thing in the '80s, like you were just saying, headphones, all these other things, but they weren't really as cool as they could be, or they were just getting started. And I think, again, I could say that the '80s kind of teed up how awesome the '90s was. You know what I mean? So that's a very good point, Bob. Like, take, for instance, here, '80s hair metal, right? We talked about it eons ago for our metal series, but kind of a big embarrassment on music in the grand scheme of rock and roll. But as you get to the 1990s, what was birthed in the '80s, like thrash metal and speed metal and heavy metal in general, and then shitty stuff like '80s, like hairband, kind of washed away. Metal got even better, just notably Pantera, right? Music in general with grunge and with alternative metal and new wave metal just got super, super cool. Think about it too, bro. when are the best fucking TV shows, the sitcoms? The 1990s, bro. You got Friends and you got Seinfeld right there. Boom, bam. And The Simpsons, which again was birthed in the late
in
1980s.
89. Yeah, it
Yeah.
started in 89. I remember that premiere episode came on after In Living Color. You
Oh
had
my
to
God.
wait for it.
Seriously, the best sketch comedy shows. Now, again, you could argue that they were, birthed earlier. You could say SNL back in the 70s, but you had Kids in the Hall, you had In Living Color, and Mad TV, all right there in, again, the late 80s, very early 90s, kind of kicking things off, right? I mean, I can go on and on and on. Let's just take, Hypercolors too, and wearing neon everywhere. That was super cool, but again, kind of birthed in the late 80s, was it not?
Oh yeah, in the late 80s, fashion was similar to how it is today, right? I think today's fashion, especially with the kids, the high school and the Gen Zers, is much aligned with the fashion of the same high school, middle school type college kids that were in the 80s, right? It's anything goes, any colors mix, tear your jeans all the fuck. Oh, that's just rude right there.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Bob. Can we go one show without your fucking ringtone?
We can't. I mean, you're welcome. Everyone needs to know that I rock
a popular guy.
So anyway,
Final Fantasy. That's another one.
These kids think that like, oh, we're so original. We're mixing like fucking neon blue and hot pink. Yeah, you're real original. But in the 90s, you took those pastel colors and you put them on like button-up t-shirts, right? Button-up short sleeve, and then you added like little pizza designs and shit. And then it really did get weird. And also in the 90s, the thing that came back and is starting to kind of leave again, but the tight jeans for men. Right? Do you if and kids, younger folks, if you don't know about the tight jeans in the early 90s, just watch the first couple of seasons of Seinfeld and check out what Seinfeld's wearing.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I mean, we may have talked about this because I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, but Seinfeld's like his apparel and attire is quite odd anyways. He's got the really tight, like blue jeans with like big tongue, like, sneakers, almost like basketball sneakers that he's rocking too. Looks very awkward, but you're right. Also, though, the 90s, we had the tight kind of rolling in from the 80s, the tightness, right? And then you got like 1994-ish when all of a sudden, let's just go ahead and buy those a couple of waist size too big. And let's sag those a little bit past, where pants are supposed to hang. And go ahead and make sure that the legs on your pants now like kind of mirror the same width as your waist. You know what I mean? Be free. You never know when you're going to have to jump out of a perfectly good airplane and your pants are going to be the ones that kind of parachute you along. You know what I mean? So there's that too. But I don't know about you. I probably had 20 pairs of Jankos, throughout the mid 90s and rocked them all the way up until like the late 90s till graduation. Probably.
Well, and even to take it to the early 90s, there's some silly pants that really ring a bell to me.
Like the MC Hammer pants?
They're called Z Cavaricis.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
I don't know if anyone remembered those, but they were very, very much skinny pants from the knee down, right? They're very tight around the calf and ankle, but then at the top, they puffed out a little bit, almost like knickers, right? so they were Z Cavaricis, and they had the pleated, like folding kind of like a clown, all right, and at the very top just below the waistline. Z Cavaricis. No, I remember them well. They were all the rage when I was in like middle school. So yeah, I don't know, I think that's a late 80s and early 90s thing, but it also was in line with the MC Hammer kind of trend with the genie pants.
I'm going to just say a stiff truth right here. I'm going to say 1989 was the 1990s and just fucking leave it at that. You know what I mean? Again, there's so many things that pull 1989 into the 90s when it comes to style, when it comes to just pop culture and everything like that. I'm just going to go ahead and take 89 and I'm going to give it ownership. I'm going to give the 1990s ownership with it. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do, because another thing that was really huge, and I don't know about you, this goes back. But I really thought I was a badass when I was wearing like body glove and had hypercolor t-shirts that you could like breathe on and put your hands on, and they would change to another pastel neon color. It was really cool.
Oh, speaking of like popular brand names, it was also very important, especially in high school in the 90s, that you had no fear.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The no
Very.
fear shirt and the bad boy. Remember that
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
eyes?
Well, if you cruise a little bit more into the mid to late 90s, everybody had to have yellow Nautica t-shirts too. You know what I mean? And then that's when people started rocking a lot of FUBU as well. Huge. Remember Wu Wear? Wu Tang's own clothing line. There it is. We did not set this up, everybody. I had no idea, but literally Bob is wearing a Wu Tang shirt right now. So yes, you do know.
Well,
I like that.
mean, and perhaps they ain't nothing to fuck with.
That's what I hear. Killer bees.
So many good things came out of the 90s. So Wu-Tang is one of them. The 90s is where we got, all of the best hip hop. No, I know everyone wants to take it back to like Sugar Hill Gang. Like that's like disco hip hop. I'm talking about like modern hip hop. And you can say that it's modern because the songs from the 90s are still played today and still listened to, and like my son's kids, like friends, age people, they know Tupac, they know Biggie,
dude.
They know Eminem.
Yeah.
Is still rocking, right? And he's from the 90s.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's just say like the best rap is probably gangster rap of the early and mid 1990s. Again, you got again Bird in the 80s, but you got like NWA, you got like Ice Cube too, and Snoop Dogg, the whole West Coast, extreme kind of more gangster rap. And then I mean, you even got like Tribe Called Quest and Wu-Tang and Beastie Boys with some of their best material in the 1990s. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Beastie Boys was the 90s.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, they
would you say Beastie Boys because it is a singular proper noun, but with the S on it at the end, I almost want to say Beastie Boys were the 90s, but that would take it away from being like an entity. So I think you said it correctly with Beastie Boys was the 90s. I'm just going to throw that out there. A little bit of grammar for everybody out there. I know this is super fun now that we're getting into this.
We'll double check with your wife later.
He knows.
She'll let us know.
Yeah, she definitely will. Well, and here's another thing, Bog, because I remember when I was a little kid. In fact, my uncle used to work at a old school like mom and pop video store, right? Fucking awesome place. But as you crept into the 90s, was there anything cooler than rolling with your parents? Now, I know that already sounds really stupid, but I'm talking like early mid 90s, rolling with your parents to the Blockbuster Video on Friday afternoon and picking out the new release movies or the whatever, right, that you're going to be watching for the weekend, maybe getting some some Sour Patch Kids too, renting a video game for your fucking Nintendo 64 or your Sega Genesis. Say,
like a movie or two and a game for the weekend. Tits.
Mm-hmm.
That's tits right there. Make sure you've got plenty of popcorn to cook. And you got a video game that you can just geek out on night and day, with only breaks to go outside and do crazy shit, or to watch those movies that you rented.
Yeah, there's something about it, and R.I.P. to Blockbuster. I think there's one in somewhere in Oregon right now, and somebody's literally just trying to keep the flame alive up there because it really doesn't make sense anymore to do videos or games that way. But that was a really special thing, and I would say on the side of kind of entertainment and leisure for most people in the 1990s, Blockbuster Video was in that conversation every single day. That's what I would have to say.
In fact, like on Friday evening for Blockbuster, there would be a 30-minute line to get your shit and get out the door, because that's what everybody did. Yeah. Everybody went to the Blockbuster and grabbed their shit for the weekend. It was definitely a place to go. And then their display of all the new releases when they hit DVD, like these days you're like, oh, when does it go to DVD? Because I want to fucking get it on Google Play, or I want to get it on digital media somewhere, whatever.
Right.
Your preference is. But back the day when it was new release, people would line up at the fucking rental store to go rent that DVD.
You know what I loved about Blockbuster too? I think it was kind of an image thing, like not for them personally, but just for almost for like plentiful stock of the new release? Was it ever like necessary that 3 like bookshelves or whatever they were called, like the movie shelving, had one release and like 90 copies of it, but they were all empty? Like there was no video cassettes behind all of the fucking display cases except for like one way down at the end. That was always odd to me. It's like, oh, obviously Titanic just came out on on video because there's 95 copies of it here in the Blockbuster.
Well, and to nerd out a little bit, that was kind of before they had live inventory systems on their computer, right? So that's how you knew if they actually had one or not. And they couldn't just tell you that, like, oh yeah, there's 33 of these and 31 are checked out. So I do have 2 back there. Let me just go grab you one. They didn't really do that so much then. Computers were really kind of early in the the mom and pop or the small businesses at the time. So like now you can fucking go to Walmart.com or whatever and look at their inventory at your local store. Like as people purchase it, it'll tick down and shit.
You see, you just mentioned something I think is pretty key, because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what was it besides the fact that we were at that age where we were old enough to get into trouble, but not old enough to have to pay bills yet? You know what I mean? Kind of like that sweet spot for your life. It is a really good age. But what is it about the 1990s that made it better than the 2000s and better than the 80s in other respects? I kind of have to hang my hat a little bit on here that there was still a lot of things that could be done in privacy. You know what I mean? There wasn't like this just published of every timeline of what we're doing on the internet for people to see. There was still some mystery about what we were doing and being able to get away with stuff and just kind of, float under the radar a little bit here. And I really think if I had to put it on a certain thing, I would say the birth and the popularity of like social media, which happened like what, 2000, I want to say like 2000, yeah, 2004, 2005, with Facebook really started to, the uptick and everything. Yeah.
That's really what fucking blew it up, was MySpace.
Yeah, and then right after that, on the coattails of MySpace, you have Facebook, and then you have you have Twitter, you have all of them all of a sudden. They just kind of came like a fucking avalanche. But I think even though that shit's pretty cool and it keeps everybody connected and all that good shit, a little bit before then, I think things were just perfectly teed up. You know what I mean? Because you still had to go to like the grocery store to the customer service or to like a record shop to go buy tickets through your Ticketmaster shit. You know what I mean? You still had paper copies of tickets too, which was always really, really cool. That's one thing I fucking hate about right now. Every time you get tickets to something, they're fucking e-tickets on your phone. And there's not that same kind of tangible takeaway and almost like, what it's almost like a keepsake kind of deal, right? Almost, what I mean? There's none of that anymore too. There's just really small things about this time period to where once you step out of the 1990s and get full blown into the 2000 era and that whole millennia, it's stuff slowly gets digitized. And I think that's kind of sad. That's all I got to say. So I'm going to put it right there. The popularity of social media and kind of, I guess, the same of the internet too, I guess, in general, right? Because you had that shit in the 90s, but it was still, it was very rudimentary for a lot of people and not everybody. You remember back in the day, if you had a computer, you were kind of a badass. Not everybody had one of those bad boys sitting in their house quite yet.
Nobody had one.
Yeah.
So. I agree. And I would say that the 90s is probably the last decade that we had the majority of things were still analog and involved some sort of manual or physical process that something had to be done tangibly instead of electronically. And as we moved on into the 2000s, it outgrew that, and now more things are digital than analog. Processes are all computerized, and everything is just all electronic imprints on whatever it is. But back in the day, you'd still have people like writing things down. People wrote in cursive. You know what I mean?
The fuck is that?
People wrote on paper in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These days, even when I go to school, I don't write a fucking thing on paper. It's all my Chromebook. I just fucking. It's all my drive, right? So there's something about that, about living through that time before there were cameras everywhere, before there was social media, before there was just digital everything. Like you said, with a little bit of privacy still. We still went outside in the 90s, right?
That was like the last generation that could do kind of both, right? As you start to creep into the late 90s, things are getting a little bit more modern, but yeah, we still went outside, built ramps, and fucking did retarded stuff on skateboards and bikes on, on silly shit like that. I do remember a lot of things of just going out and having a good time without any kind of assistance from the digital age, which is interesting, man. It's different. It's definitely different. There's definitely a lot more to the 90s that I think is just something that I'll always miss. But I would definitely say that music was pretty fucking teed up in the 90s. I know I mentioned it a little while ago, but I'm going through all the genres in my head, like previous to the show today. I was like, dude, rap, fucking just tits, in the 90s. Rock music, tits. Grunge, that is the 90s, right?
MTV was tits in the 90s.
Still, now again, you got till like the mid to late 90s and they started doing a lot with the Real World and Road Rules and shit like that, and that was like the beginning of the end for them. But for the longest time, remember at like 2 a.m. in the 90s, MTV Raps was on repeat. You know what I mean? Ready to rock and roll. You could get on there and zone
Headbangers Ball every Friday night.
Yeah, that was some good shit right there, bro. But everything. I mean, even I don't know. As I tread into pop music in the 1990s, was there ever really a good time for pop music? I guess the 90s. I mean, who was the tits in the 1990s? Madonna?
She's more 80s.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean,
okay,
she was still relevant in the 90s, but she wasn't like the it girl anymore by the time the 90s came around.
Would you say Mariah Carey, maybe?
Definitely Mariah Carey. Also to cross genre a little bit more, Shania Twain was very much an it girl in the 90s.
Dude, Garth Brooks. Actually, a fantastic songwriter. I'm not a big fan of country music, but I got to give Garth Brooks his right there. Tip of the hat, Mr. Garth Brooks.
He might just be the GOAT for country music. Yeah, as far as pop, I mean, Michael Jackson. I mean, I think that guy dominated from the 80s until 2000. Really,
I'll buy that. I'll buy that for sure.
I mean, the 90s is when the pyrotechnic hair burning incident happened. And that was like at his pinnacle of promoting Pepsi, all that. Sports wise, the 90s was epic because you had Michael Jordan just dominating everything.
Go ahead and say it. What about the Dallas Cowboys? They had a pretty good 1990s, didn't they?
Yeah, they did okay.
Hey, Redskins, and I can call them that because they were called that in the 90s. Our last Super Bowl was 91. We just started off that decade with a nice little bang too, and then you guys followed up for like 3-4 years in a row, didn't you?
Yeah. 3 out of 4.
Not bad.
25 years ago. No big deal. So, I don't know. There's so many things about the 90s. I think the sitcom itself really evolved and took over in the 90s. There were sitcoms. Obviously, you had like the Cosby Show.
MASH was another really big one back in the the 70s, 80s. Of course,
And MASH is kind of like a throwback because that style of how it was recorded, minus the laughs. But that's how MASH was and how serious and like realistic it was. Minus the studio laughs. That's kind of the precursor to Modern Family and that new style of single camera shot. But they did it. Obviously they plugged in the sounds because back then that's the only way they did it. There wasn't a different way. But that was huge. But then in the 90s, you just had this pop culture entering into the sitcoms. It was no longer like middle class America sitcoms. It was no longer Family Ties. It was no longer fucking Bill Cosby. Now it was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Blossom, right? And it was more the modern culture entering in and targeting the younger generations of people instead of the middle-aged folks like there were, and that's never stopped, and that's pretty much how it is now.
That's a good point, man. I do think I think the best collection of sitcoms is in the 1990s. That's for sure. Because I'm sitting there going through it. Even Wings. Do you remember Wings?
Yeah, it's a great one.
Walker, Texas Ranger. Come on now.
Oh yeah.
Come on now. Frasier, right? Probably the most successful spinoff from another successful sitcom, right?
Because Cheers was crossed over through the 90s.
Yeah, it was just the tip, right? Because that was definitely an 80s show, but that was That was another one. And I'll say, just to tip the other way, you had Married with Children. You mentioned Modern Family. What would especially the early 1990s be without Kelly or Bud walking into that fucking living room and just the canned laughter and applause going fucking nuts, right?
Or for that matter, Fox in general.
Yeah.
Fox owned the 90s. I mean, you think about it. You had Married with Children. You had the X-Files.
Right? Oh my God.
The
How could I forget that?
Was 90s, right? That was the Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks, baby. The Simpsons right in there too, bud. Right all in there. Melrose Place, don't forget, or Beverly Hills 90210. I say what you will, but I fucking watched it as a kid. I'm not gonna lie.
No, Melrose Place is huge. Beverly Hills 90210 was huge.
Big Dylan fan, huge Dylan fan. Love the chops. You know what I'm saying?
Of course, it had influence till recently in your life.
It's true.
I haven't told Daring to grow the chops, and he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, just watch Beverly Hills 90210 and grow you some Jason Priestley or what's his name, Luke Perry chops."
Luke Perry.
That's the thing.
R.I.P. baby. You know what I mean?
And people will make fun of you probably, but that's only because they can't do it.
You're so right. At his age, if you can get in there and do it before it becomes like you're the creepy older guy with chops, you know what I mean? Because there's definitely a transition where facial hair at an early age is phenomenally cool. But capitalize on it now, big man. That's for him.
Yeah,
hope he gets out there.
Once you get into college, you're just another hipster.
Then it's not cool anymore. No.
As a freshman, if you can grow the sideburns, I say okay.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about it the other day. I think this is what got me started. We were talking about something from high school, and you had mentioned like, well, did you get a surge? I was like, there was some fantastic just snacks and beverages from the 1990s that are no longer there either. I think surge is definitely one of them.
That's where Flaming Hot Cheetos was born.
I know.
That's iconic. That's Americana right there. That is Americana in a bag. Flaming Hot Cheetos.
I don't think, and I obviously don't have any stats out. I'm just going to be speaking right out of my asshole, which I typically do. So people are used to it. So nothing really new or crazy going on here. But I'll have to say that Flaming Hot Cheetos, and they spawned a whole flaming hot fucking line of snack foods, is probably still the most popular like chips, like right now to date. That's just what I'm going to say. At least that's how I feel.
Oh yeah, it's been ruining shirts for 30 years.
Dude, and spicing up like ghetto sandwiches too. I remember when they first came out, I would make myself a bologna sandwich with 2 pieces of bologna on white bread. That's right, Wonder Bread, kids. Or even Iron Kids. Do you remember that bread?
Oh,
that's
of course. It's
yeah.
Still around.
Yeah, of course. Good shit. Everybody knows white bread is fucking garbage now, but that's okay. But I get a piece of like American cheese. Yeah, that's right. Like just the nastiest Kraft single rockin', 2 pieces of fried bologna. And in the middle of the fried bologna, I'd put like half a bag of like of Flaming Hot Cheetos and add that crunch element and that spice element to a beautiful ghetto sandwich. It was phenomenal. Probably one of my favorite things in the 1990s.
Well, and while we're on snack foods, I'm also going to say that the 90s, it was a Doritos and Mountain Dew time. Right?
Dude. Believe it or not, and I'm a little sensitive to caffeine right now. I do remember at all times at my dad's house, we had a case of Mountain Dew and a case of fucking Pepsi at all times, dude. Even though I'm more of a Coca-Cola guy, but that's another conversation. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and pound the rest of my warm fucking Mountain Dew that was sitting like on my speaker or what have you, and go right back to bed. That is a beautiful memory of the 90s that I can never get back. You could go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just like picturing the Mountain Dew thing going on there.
Was I wearing a shirt or was I topless?
Oh, I don't know. I was just watching this portion.
Oh my goodness. But go ahead. You're absolutely right. This is when you remember those commercials. It was always some extreme sports guy jumping off a fucking mountain.
And speaking of extreme sports, you know what else was born in the 90s? The fucking X Games.
This is true.
Boom, from the 90s. Skateboarding went mainstream. Snowboarding became a thing.
This is very true.
Skydiving became a thing. The Matrix was born in the 90s.
Right at that tip, right at the end of it. But
just the tip.
What would the 1999 year be like? I wonder for myself, because when I went and saw that movie in the theaters, I came out like kind of life changing mentally. You know what I mean? Like, wow, what if this is the case? What if everything is a simulation? What a fucking phenomenal storyline for a movie. It's never been done quite like this before. It was life changing. I'll say you pull that thing out of 1999. I'm a totally different person today.
Perhaps. And I'll tell you this, that movie was so ahead of its time, right? That people couldn't really grasp it near as well as you could today with the digital age and all this virtual and virtual headsets and being able to immerse yourself into, you know, computing and virtual environments. Like, it's much easier to conceptualize today. But in the 99, when you turned on your computer and you still hear, you know,
dial up, baby.
that was really hard for people. That's what was so mind-blowing when that movie came out. It really fucked people up. To this day, you still hear people talking about simulation.
By the way, oh yeah, when you see like when you have deja vu now, all of a sudden that's a glitch in the matrix moving forward. God forbid it was a black cat too. Then things are really fucking obviously heating up. You know what I mean? Because that was much different. And I'll say this just because you brought up dial-up too. The 1990s was the last decade where getting on the internet was a privilege in your fucking household, because that means everybody else had to get off the fucking phone, and dad couldn't be expecting any fucking phone calls or anything like that because you had to carve out some time. There was like a sign up sheet with a schedule. If you wanted to get on that bad boy, that was something where you're like, I deserve to look at porn right now because I put in my time. You know what I mean?
So there's some like things of growing up, us in high school, right? So you go over to your friend's house in the 90s and you're like, oh my God, they have a computer.
Oh, dude, we are getting down.
We're going to go check out some Netscape Navigator real quick. Watch this shit. Right?
Netscape.
Right? And then you get on the computer, right? And then you're like, oh, you have internet? What the fuck? This guy's like, his dad does okay. Right? This guy's fucking got internet, right? And then when you're on the internet, and the phone rings and it doesn't kick you off, you're like, holy fucking shit, this guy's parents are loaded.
This guy's got a dedicated line for the internet. Dedicated line. We got a badass over here.
Where's the yacht? Fucking A, dude. Because even that was it call waiting. It was call waiting, right? That gave you the feature to where you could actually be on the internet. When you had the ability to answer a call while you're on a call, it was call waiting.
I have no idea. I have like totally blacked out all the perks of a landline for years now. You know what I mean? So you're bringing me back.
I do want to say it was call waiting that gave you the whole ability to be on the internet and still answer a phone call at the same time. And no one ever had it. Like, it was very rare that like you'd be on the internet and someone didn't answer the phone and you didn't get shut the fuck down. Because that's what would happen. There's no warning. Someone answered the phone and the priority would go to the phone and you'd just lose your internet. But this is also a time when social media existed only if you knew the IP address of the local fucking chat area.
Oh, chat rooms in general,
like
right?
in Albuquerque chat. I was in there one time in 8th grade in my digital graphics class in 8th grade where I was drawing a Garfield 1 pixel at a time on an Apple II.
yeah.
Fucking stuck off into the chat room because we had internet. And that's kind of the birth of it, but that was like a nerd thing. That was like the D&D crowd.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, just in general, the old AOL chat rooms too was like, I remember mid 90s. I had a buddy that had a computer at that time. We'd get on there and we would just go crazy and fuck around, almost like being somewhat kind of like digital terrorist. You know what I mean? In these chat rooms, just bust into something not so serious and just start typing obscene, nasty shit until people get all pissed off at you. It was like the very first like social media trolls, right? Yeah. Right there. Yeah, that was it, baby. That was the birth of trolls. I never knew that it was going to be my calling, but I should have put things together. What's interesting too, I'm just thinking as we're talking about the internet, youthful internet kind of activities, I would say that the modern internet killed the industry and the allure of having a dirty magazine under your pillow. You know what I mean? There's no point to do that if you move past the 90s anymore. Everything, again, is completely digitized in that sense too. So I will say that Hustler and Playboy and Club Magazine were killed in the 1990s.
Until the pages got stuck together. Then your centerfold turns into just a center.
That's where you got to have some kind of willpower. You know what I mean? You got to, hey, this is tangible, bro. And you don't know how quick, you know, how you don't know your trajectory of your shot, sometimes when you get really excited at that young age. So you got to be,
you got to like do it like this.
Yeah, you have to have a clear runway, you know what I mean, like off to the side. Oh, that is classic shit. I'll tell you what, Bob, I have to admit, I don't know about you, didn't have to buy your 40s. Jess got yours for you, huh?
You did.
I felt like a fucking scumbag buying a 40 ounce because, first of all, I had to go to 3 different stores, right? I went to my bougie, like posh kind of liquor store that I go to all the time. And I don't want to ask anybody, right? That's the first thing. I'm like, dude, if it's somewhere, it's going to be in the coolers with the beer, and I'm going to go to the single beers, and there should be a couple of them right there. I'm kind of guessing. And of course, I walk around all the coolers. I'm just walking the perimeter of this store because that's where the coolers are. I get to the single beers, and of course, it's Denver. It's a posh liquor store. There's just a bunch of like micro brew single beers and shit from like Colorado breweries. No 40 ounces, no tall boys of Steel Reserve or anything like that. And of course, I'm the only one in the store because it's like 10 in the morning yesterday, right? Because I go to the liquor store at 10 in the morning like everybody else. And the girl already said hi to me because I'm the only person in there when I walked in. I was like, she's going to ask me, like, what the fuck am I doing? Do I need help? Am I finding everything okay? So she comes in right out of the gate, perfect timing. As I'm like looking everywhere, a little bit lost. Hey, you finding everything okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not actually. And this seems like a silly question, but do you guys carry 40 ounces of malt liquor? And she's like, no, we don't. And I just said to her, makes sense. It kind of makes sense. They are super ghetto. And I'm like already walking out of the store, a little defeated, a little bit embarrassed. You know what I mean? Like, God damn it. Fuck. I was like, maybe they're at the grocery store because I don't know if you know, but up until a few years ago, you couldn't sell like beer in the grocery store. Now there's beer. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I remember at the grocery store, again, at the end of the beer aisle, after all the, 30 packs and all that shit, I think there was definitely some tall boys and some 40s. I go in the grocery store, it's just tall boys at the very end. And there's not even Steel Reserve. I'm kind of a little bit offended. You know what I mean? There's like Coors, there's like Miller, there's a couple of them, but there's no 40 ounces. And I was like,
hoity-toity shit right there.
Yeah. So I'm like, Jesus Christ, where can I go? I talked to my brother yesterday. He's like, well, you can go on Colfax, and that's like the shittiest like street in Denver where all the ghetto crackheads are. He's like, I'm sure they got a liquor store down. I'm like, I'm positive they have it down there too, but I'm not driving 30 minutes to get down to the shitty part of Denver to go buy a 40 ounce for, let's call it $3, right? Then I remember there's a little Habib place, and yeah, I just said it. It's a liquor store,
like a bodega.
Yeah, ran by Middle Eastern folks that hardly speak English. But I was like, if there's any place around me, it's got to be in this little bodega type store. I go in there, and it's almost like they were hiding them, Bob, because like they had all the coolers in the back, and then as you go into like where it looks like it's for employees only, there's one more cooler, and it's like in this little narrow hallway that like it's got like a bunch of boxes everywhere. And I finally look at the very bottom. There's like 4 SKUs: Budweiser, Bud Light, Coors Light, and fucking Corona Familiar, which I think is like a dark Corona beer or something like that. So I was like, here we go. $3.99, purchased it. Definitely felt like a douchebag because it's still like 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and homeboy rings me up. He's like, oh, let me get you your bag. I was like, naturally, give me my brown bag too.
Yeah, you got to have that.
Yeah. So he throws it in the brown bag. The brown bag is not even big enough to cover the tip or whatever. So I'm just walking out. And right next to it is like a bougie fucking little Starbucks with like an outdoor seating area. People are drinking coffee. I'm walking out at 11 in the morning with nothing else but my 40 ounce brown bagging it like a fucking G. And I was like, well, that was slightly embarrassing, but slightly humbling. God bless the 1990s.
Well, I thought it was a great idea because the 40 ounce really is 90s, and the fact that they still make them is funny. But that we can still find them is good too. But I do gotta say, as far as a stiff drink, pounding a 40 is pretty stiff.
It really is, because there's one thing about a 40. If you have any kind of taste buds, you're not going to want to sip this like a regular 3.5 beers, because
you have to pound it. Look at
that. Dude, I'm down to like here on this bad boy. Yeah, you got to get in there. I'm going to show you up. But you're absolutely right. That's one thing that you have to do. You have to considerably drink more quicker, or else your beer is going to be lukewarm. And not only is lukewarm beer a bad idea, but lukewarm cheap beer or malt liquor Very, very bad idea. So you got to do yourself a favor, and you do need to chug it. And that's how it still has that nice pack, that nice little punch it packs right there, dude. I'll tell you that. But you're right though, dude. I say when you get a 40 ounce, you're committing, right? You're committing to like not doing anything else productive for the rest of that day. I would think, right? Because after
I would agree. There is no mystique about the 40. I mean, it has a lid that screws back on, but the lids never go back on.
This is
you
true.
open it, you pound it, you toss it, and if you really want to call it a day, you drink a second one.
You really do,
and then that's basically a 6-pack.
It's a little bit more than a 6-pack because 40 ounces, right? Let's just do some quick Andrew Lang kind of math here.
It's three and a half.
Yeah, it's about 3.5 beers. So it's literally right around 7 beers. So that's no punk bitch, especially if you're not doing like what we're doing here. Because let's face it, both Miller High Life and Bud Light, a little lighter on the, the alcohol content. It's like a 4.3, 4.4, something like that.
We didn't go old English or Mickey's.
See, I really was hoping there was going to be Mickey's, but to be quite honest, after my little fiasco scavenger hunt yesterday for 40 ounces in ritzy kind of suburbs of Denver, I'm glad and I'm humble and I'm lucky that I found something, because I was literally thinking I was going to come to the game with a tall boy of Bud Light, and I couldn't do that.
You would have had to have found a liquor store next to a fucking gun shop to get a 40 in Mickey's.
I think it's interesting how Mickey's does their distribution, because I think it's just like that. You're all, that's too nice, too high of an average income in this area. Let's scoot it down. Oh, a little bit shady. Crime's picked up a little bit. Mean average income has dropped about 20, 30 grand. Let's get some grenades in that store right there. You know what I mean? Remember
there's a couple of abandoned houses. Oh, we're here.
We're here. Post up. We're making lots of money now.
Finding Mickey's.
That is one thing that's a little bit depressing in our little tribute here to the 1990s. I do feel nothing says it more from a 40 ounce like a Mickey's 40 ounce. Let's just face it, bro. The color, the nice greenish bottle, the little bit kind of, it's not very good beer. Let's just face it. You know what I mean? But it is strong enough. You know what I mean? Remember Mickey's Ice? You want to kick it up a little bit more? Grab one of those bad boys. I think it's like 5.9% or something like that. But that's the only thing I'm missing out on today.
Well, overall, the 90s holds a special place for us because that's where it's our coming of age decade. And I think in every generation, the coming of age decade is always one that you hold closer to the vest, right? Everyone is partial to the decade that they're living in when they get their cherry popped, right? I mean, that's a good way to put it, because that's about that time when you're like 13 to 16 ish, whatever decade you're in the middle of at that point is probably the one that you're going to hold near and dear for the rest of your life and say it's the best. If I were to ask my sister, I would say that she would probably say that the 80s were tits, and that's all it is, that there would be nothing better than that. Whereas my brother would probably say that, maybe the 80s or 90s. He's kind of a cusper, right? So I really don't know. But for me, it'll always be the 90s. It'll always be the shoulder padded suits.
Oh, man. My mom used to have a whole wardrobe of those bad boys. She was getting ready to be a linebacker, I'm pretty sure, at her office. But yes,
double-breasted pinstripes. So, I don't know. It's
good times.
You'll never change my mind there. And a lot of the best movies for us came out in the 90s, but again, they were born in the 80s. Terminator 2, right? That's probably the best of the series, but without the Terminator 1 in the 80s.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas came out in 1996 or 7. The Crow came out in 93. Those are like some of my top movies right there, bud. You know what I mean? There's just that. Of course they are. You're creative.
But I don't know. The 90s was just, as far as culturally, the 90s was where it's at. I think that the economy was doing really well, especially in the mid to late 90s with the .com bump that everyone was getting for the first time in a long time. America had a zero debt, no trillions of dollars in the hole. Everyone was doing good. Commerce was doing good. I think it was kind of the pinnacle of modern times for our economy. So I don't know.
I think the early 90s especially too is like what people look like and hold up and revere as just the pinnacle of culture, of economy, of, let's face it, we had and I'll just say this, and I know I'm going to get some shit for it, but we had the best war in the first Desert Storm War because it was quick and easy. You know what I mean? It was just, everything we did in the 90s seemed to be dialed in and the best. And I think like we are Bob, we are some of the best products of the 1990s, if you ask me. And that's a stiff truth right there, baby.
100%. 100%. We're some of the best part that came out of the 90s.
And I think we're going to go ahead and leave it at that. We've ran out of time now as we just kind of highlight us being the best thing since sliced bread, Wonder Bread at that too. So Bob, take us away, bud.
Thank you everyone for listening. It was our pleasure to get on and just drone on about how good the 90s were while we pound these 40s. Like and subscribe, hit us up on Patreon. If you have a question or you want to talk shit, hit us up on Facebook or in the comments of YouTube, however you need to get a hold of us. But anyway, it's been great. As always, it's a pleasure, Scott.
Bob, you are a dream. We'll see you next week, and hopefully I can see you before then. Everybody else, bye.